love your neighbor, and buy local. The nostrums, the maxims, if you will, the sayings about local economy are near is better than far, small than big, simple than complex. And of course, I'm the blogger with the biggest pen. I write sometimes with footnotes, and I've learned to restrain my ardor for footnotes. But in the footnotes, at 5-point type in Helvetica font, the neutral Swiss font, we have the following: personal is better than corporate, and physical than abstract. These are, in a way, they're kind of the fruits of the gospel. They are the lay of the land for the free market, I think. Though certainly I recognize in a free market, capitalistic, positive, progressing world in which we live, things sometimes do have to get abstract. I mean, the idea of media of exchange may become abstract, though I would warn against cryptocurrencies as just another con, maybe just a little better than the con of fractional reserve, digital and paper-based money, right? That will promise to bring ruin to the country, ruin which is building ever higher, is a wave about to crest against the sleeping city on the shore, a 90-foot wave. The city somnolent, snoring, very comfortable in its earlier wash of consumer goods, right, which its residents have purchased on plastic, and now the wave is going to come and wash away many happy circumstances, right, and many souls with their optimism puffed by easy money, easy credit. David Toulis here, a skeptic of the status quo, and wanting there to be greater prosperity in Chattanooga and the Hamilton County area. And if you are listening from a far place, maybe you're well beyond our 92.7 signal. Maybe you are one who enjoys our digital signal. We have a second station, and if you're on that, we welcome you. 95.3 HD4, that's 95.3 high definition channel 4. All new cars have HD. And of course, your smartphone has an app that you can have us be your first pick upon. Ooh, that ends in a preposition. Don't like that, but we have the TuneIn Radio app, which is free. And if you have that, make Nougat Radio your default station. And so whenever you open that app, we open up. And though you may be far away, you may be in Nashville for some business, maybe on the way to Atlanta for picking up a son from the airport, coming in from a foreign country. You can hear your favorite shows. And of course, we have Sean Hannity every day at 3:00, just after the David Toulis Show. That's me, David Toulis. Love your neighbor, and Buy Local, brought to you by Nuganomics.com. Now, today at Nuganomics.com, I was rushing after I had made my trip up Burchard Road on Jones Gap Road up on the mountain, Soddy Mountain, to come back and finish off my post about the killing, the courageous killing of a woman in a car trapped in a forest by police officers and sheriff's deputies serving Jim Hammond, our sheriff who is up for re-election. And these are an exciting development in Chattanooga and Hamilton County. I came back and rushed to get my post out. Now you can read that post at Nuganomics.com. I suggest you be a subscriber. Subscribe to Nuganomics.com and read about my initial report based on a visit to the killing area. And I didn't see the spot where Donna Lynn Allen was separated from her life by a police bullet. It didn't happen quite there. The bullet lodged in her flesh, and she perished either in the hospital or on the way there. And the headline is: Officers Kill Woman in Car Trapped in Woods, they have plenty of cover. Now, if that's the case, then just the very fact that she died in the woods, and that I've seen the approaches to the kill zone, I didn't actually see where it was she died. Tim Blaylock, the owner, would not let me wander about, and he would not take me there. I guess he was being very discreet, did not want to deal with members of the press or members of the media. Both of them were there in spades yesterday, and I came in this morning to find out the lay of the land, to look at the topography and see if the officers were making use of time, space, and cover, which are the key elements in police reform. These are the elements that David Roddy has been very slow to implement in Chattanooga. The mayor has forgotten about his vaguely worded promises at his inauguration as chief in August. But they are the main means by which human life is spared. And the dignity and the dignity of the citizenry protected by the Constitution is upheld if those things are remembered. Cover, space, and time. In other words, we don't have to rush to make this arrest, right? We don't have to break the speed limits to chase after this person who failed to yield, right? She's dead now because she failed to yield somehow, involving herself in a traffic infraction under the transportation code that applies to people involved in transportation. That is to say, people who are buying and selling the service of taking people or goods from point A to point B. That's what's called transportation. And the cops in Red Bank, men who have not washed their mouths out recently, I think, though one of them has staggering tattoos that have Bible verses on them, one of the officers in Red Bank. These men chased after Donna Lynn Allen, joined by Soddy-Daisy officers overseen by, I guess, acting chief or soon-to-be named Chief Jeff Gann, and officers from Sheriff Jim Hammond's Sheriff's Department. Now, there are several ways in which to look at this story, but one way that I can't not look at it is the initial authority under which the encounter was made, right? It's an aggressive encounter between the officer and the member of the public. Now, Red Bank has an excuse for this traffic encounter because it has not been notified by me, David Toulis, your host here, of the scope and limit of the statute that it enforced against Donna Allen to initiate this traffic stop. Now, what I mean to say is that Donna had failed to yield, and so comprised herself and gave the officer probable cause under Title 55, the transportation law, and he chased after her because she was obviously involved in transportation, the carrying of goods or people for hire. Now, what we have to find out from the family is, was Donna actually carrying that man in her next seat for pay, or was she hauling goods? Was she involved in transporting something to some other place for pay? Because that's what transportation is. It's the profit, capital-oriented, profit-making, profit-seeking service under the transportation statute, which is controlled by the UAPA, which is to say the Uniform Administrative Procedures Act. So how is it that activity that's under administrative law breaks out into bloodshed? How is that? How is it that if there's a grievance that the state has for an abuse of its rules of the road, how is it that we have suddenly a crime in progress, police cars roaring after this sedan with two people in it who I think are probably private users, though she may have had a license of some kind at some point and it may have been expired possibly. But she's being chased after under the presumption, the rebuttable presumption, if she only had known how to do that, the rebuttable presumption of being involved in transportation. But she was a private user, I want to say. I'm just going to surmise that. I don't know that for sure. But it was a transportation stop and ended in a surrounding. She went up into this neighborhood, Burchard Road in Soddy-Daisy, fleeing the cops behind her. And she went, which Burchard Road is a dead end. Little did she know that when she went up that last driveway, that at 11716 Burchard Road, the property of Tim Blaylock, that it was a dead end. That was going to be her end, either for capture, where she was going to have to sign the ticket, right? Or she would be taking in cuffs for resisting. Of course, resisting stop, arrest, or frisk applies only if you are using force. Okay, so there would have to be some showing of force being used for that to have been made to apply to her. Of course, she's dead, and it can't. So she ran her car up that very steep driveway past the stone-encased mailbox of Mr. Blaylock and went down the gravel way toward the house, which probably early morning probably was dark. Maybe there was a street light out there over the parking area. I don't know that. And she went to the right through wooded area, lightly dotted with trees, plenty of room for cars to go about. There's one trail that I noticed going back into the woods. She may have taken that. But I'm sure Donna realized that she was coming near the end of where she could go, because she was in a wooded area on a mountain going slightly downhill on private property, people she didn't know, evidently, because Mr. Blaylock did not know anything about this person. And so there she was in the woods, officers roaring behind her in their powerful cruisers, V8s, of course, maybe some Crown Vs involved, or some interceptor cars. And so here she made, as it were, a last stand, trying to elude the officer. Now, she was shot because one officer received an injury in his leg, according to reports. And the question that I want to raise is, did that injury imply to the officer that she was going to kill to get out, that she would do anything to escape, as a mass murderer might, right? If or someone who's robbed a bank or committed some kind of heinous felony might be willing to risk the lives of others and take the lives of others to make an escape. Is this woman like that? The thinking of the officer somehow has to pretend that, as he makes his reports now, right, he's on paid vacation, that somehow he believed that since she had hurt him, that she's willing to kill people to make her escape. And therefore, lethal force is justified. Now, I mentioned in the story at Nuganomics.com, and I do suggest you go there. And in fact, I suggest you become a subscriber. There is reference to Tennessee versus Garner, which is a case. You can read about it if you want. You can read it online at Justicia. You can read about it also at Wikipedia, 1985, in which the court rules that you can't kill a fleeing suspect unless you believe that the suspect poses a significant threat of death or serious physical injury to the officer or others. And that language has been picked up in the Tennessee Code annotated. I think it's exactly that same wording. Did the officer who killed this woman, will he be able to show, I guess we should say now, that she did that, that her injury of him shows that she was willing to impose death or serious physical injury to others, right? And he could say, well, she hurt me. She just as easily could have run down somebody else. And we don't know that she didn't have a gun, right? So those are all kinds of things that they can say in their defense, in the usual way that state people do, right? State officers, state boards, TBIs, GBIs, FBIs, they all are, in the end, defenders of state power. The powerful against the weak. If you're powerful, you are always going to be holy and righteous. Your actions will be upheld as lawful and even defensible, right? We can even make a case that it was a good kill and it was a necessary kill. It's never quite put that way, however. And if you're poor and weak and ugly, or just common, well, you, by definition, are a sinner, right? In our day, where we seem to have rejected God, and we worship power. This is especially true among Christian people. Right? People who are practicing Christians are as guilty of this as the lost souls out there in Hamilton County. They think that somehow that the state is neutral, right? That somehow God doesn't make claims upon it. That God has nothing to say about the state itself and its necessity to obey and limit itself pursuant to Romans 13. What we have is a Revelation 13 government, and we think that we have a Romans 13 government, but we don't. We have a Revelation 13 government, and there is in this killing a larger picture. And maybe, unless you want to call me and interrupt me, you can sure do that. uh, we can look at this larger picture. Number one, I think that the elected sheriff of our county, Jim Hammond, should be accountable for this killing by these corporation cops. Right, these are mall cops, effectively. They don't have punitive authority under Chattanooga versus Davis and Chattanooga versus Myers, two cases rising out of Chattanooga, no less, from the Supreme Court. The most recent of those, I think, is about 2001. These cases indicate that municipal corporations have civil authority only, and yet we have these organizations which, under the statute, do have authority from the people through the sheriff, and these departments operate the people's power through the sheriff. He has the power to delegate, and if you go to Nuganomics.com, you can read some somewhat theoretical pieces about this question, touching on David Roddy and Jim Hammond. But you don't have to go there. Very few people read Nuganomics.com, and that's because there are very few people who really matter. The ones who matter are subscribers, okay, and that's a tiny number. And I'm not upset at that. I realize that my approach and my analysis is extraordinarily useful to the people in a small self-selected group, and that's, again, Nuganomics.com, our sponsor here on the David Tulis Show. The woman is dead because of predatory commercial enforcement. That's a key word. I wrote down some keywords on my as I was coming in this morning from my overheated office at my book cluttered desk area at home. And the keywords include predatory commercial enforcement, which is what happened to Donna Lynn Allen. Outside the scope of the statute, and Red Bank, though, has an excuse. Soddy-Daisy has an excuse for this transportation stop gone good, I guess you could say, right? Gone brave, gone courageous in the death of Donna Lynn Allen. Because they don't know the scope of the statute. Apparently, though the statute's public record, they act as if they had never read it. Now, there is one party that does not have an excuse, and that's our elected sheriff, because I've given him notice about the scope and limits of Title 55. And he should be very careful to mind the limits of that law. And that's called Transportation Administrative Notice. And it was given to him in early March. And you can read about it, of course, at Nuganomics.com. This whole process, a long process of review and analysis and an unrebutted administrative notice. And his officers are complicit personally in this killing. If this killing is a bad killing, these officers in the sheriff's department, because of notice, right, because they've been given administrative notice, will, or can be, I'm not saying they will be, but they can be, by an astute attorney, be shown to have been acting in their personal capacity under color of law. And that's how this process of reform works. It works through the oath that each individual deputy or officer in a police corporation makes before God to uphold the Constitution and obey all the laws, right? You cannot disobey a law. If you enforce a law more broadly than the scope of that law states, then you're doing so at your own peril, right? So the officers are personally liable for abuses, and they're liable in bad faith. They're liable in bad faith for abuses once they've been notified. And they don't have to ever have read this notice or ever heard anything about it. But if that notice goes to their corporate head, let's say Sheriff Jim Hammond, or let's say Mayor Andy Burke, they legally are liable because they legally are responsible for it, right? If you, it's the way, and I'm trying to get off my desk a lengthy piece on the doctrine of notice, and you might say only a lawyer would read it, but it is a legal review about this, the power of this remedy. It is a remedy that a common person can make, right? Think of the other things upon which you can make notice to officials. If you cite the law or cite the facts to these officials and they don't refute or rebut your notice, well, the notice then controls. That becomes a controlling legal framework of whatever happens later. And Sheriff Hammond's deputies, if they're involved in a killing that is not good, right? A bad slaying, a bad execution, right? You've got good executions that the police can do, and then you've got some bad ones. If these officers are involved in a bad execution, the notice will be there to highlight the fact that they knew that they didn't have authority under Title 55 to assist in any transportation stop of someone not involved in transportation. So if we can pair off the sheriff's department, we have these two corporations, Soddy-Daisy and Red Bank, who are kind of on their own until I get around to giving them my real chat, my 20-page legal digression, if you will, on the annoying limits, the annoying and liberating and free limits of that particular part of Tennessee law. David, you're listening to radio. Love your neighbor and buy local.
3, 2, 1.
Chattanooga Radio. Digital FM 95.3 HD4. 92.7 FM's news now.
The brother of the former Assistant Police Chief Edwin McPherson found dead in his home. Police say Gary McPherson had